I was walking down on the pier the other day in Worthing. We got a very lovely pier. It was a lovely day, actually. And I went for a stroll just to sort of get some exercise, went onto the pier and was minding my own business. And this couple passed me and said, "Hang on a minute, we know you." "Oh, do you?" "Yeah, we watch your videos. In fact, actually, we're patrons of yours." And I said, "Oh, blimey, that's very kind of you. Lovely to meet you." Had a lovely old chat with them. And then they went on their way. And just as I went, there was a fisherman fishing over there, and he said, "Actually, I recognise you too." But he wouldn't have spoken to me unless those other couple had mentioned it. So I leant on the rail there, and we were having a good old conversation about fishing and the Worthing itself and a whole load of things. And it made me think, what's happened to conversation? When was the last time you had a lovely conversation with people you just didn't actually know? Does it happen? Does it happen in your life? I'd be interested to know, because I think conversation seems to be disappearing. Not vanishing, not massively vanishing, but those conversations where you would stop somebody in the street and just chat about things. Nothing terribly deep or meaningful. But what happens about those deep and meaningful conversations that you used to have when you were meeting people in the pub? Is it that people are just incredibly busy? I mean, I don't go to a pub anymore. It's not that I really frequented, but if I'm with a friend and we go into a pub, that's one thing. But regular people, I just don't know how people can afford a pint of beer anymore or any of the drinks. I don't want to see the pubs. Let me caveat this by saying I don't want to see the pubs disappear. But I fear that not only is the government trying to get shot of all places that we can actually have real life conversations. Now, this isn't a conspiracy theory, don't get me wrong, but I do feel there's I don't know whether it's a deliberate thing, but just through an economic thing at the moment with the cost of living crisis, it seems that 70% of pubs are likely to close in the next 12 months or some such figure. I can't say that that's the accurate figure, but that's something I saw bandied about. And how do you know? Where do you find out this information? But with pubs gone as a centre of conversation or a centre of people coming together in real life and having a conversation, it seems conversations get slung onto the social media, which of course is the worst place to have a conversation with anybody about anything. Because people can say whatever they damn well like, however they feel, not taking into the consideration of the person they're talking to or indeed that person's personal situations. They don't moderate their language terribly much or anything like that, which you would do when you were face to face with somebody. If somebody was having a conversation with you and you mentioned something and you could see that that was an emotionally bad subject to talk about. Perhaps you would see tears in their eye, or perhaps you would see there was something else behind it that you might go, I'll leave this conversation for now. I won't penetrate further with it. Or you might change the conversation saying, are you all right? Have I hit upon a nerve? I'm ever so sorry, it's just my opinion, but I'll moderate my behavior because now I want to help you and find out what's wrong with you, which is what you do in real life. But if you take that conversation and you shove it online, where you cannot possibly know the reaction other than either there is silence from the other person or they double down on their message and go, well, just hang on a minute, you're being a bit over the... You don't know. And I think conversations online or threads within comments even is a dangerous thing. I know that Jordan Peterson did something about Twitter saying it's an insane platform for a number of reasons, which I advise you to go and have a look at his video. I think it's absolutely true. But I'm talking about what's happened to conversation. Where do you go now to have a conversation? If you can't afford to go into a pub because the price of a pint is ridiculously high, then and you might want to just have a drink with friends, do you invite them back to your house? Are your friends there? Do you have little soirees anymore, or is that too expensive, or do people just not got time? But it's the random conversations. That's what I also like. You can have a conversation with somebody you just meet in the street. But does that happen? Are we all too busy? Like with me and the conversation I had, I got somebody else's opinion about the town I'm in. I didn't know him from Adam. He'd seen my films. He'd recognized me. We were just having a very nice conversation, and he was saying a few things about the town that I live in. And I pointed out something about the architecture of the town that I live in, and he would disagree on some things and he would agree on others, and I could listen to somebody else's point of view without feeling that there was any form of personal attack, which very often online it starts to get very strained and one way, because people tend to double down if you question them about something. Whereas in a real life conversation, when you're having a conversation with somebody, they may go, yeah, okay, I see what you mean, but I'm not really, I still feel this. And you go, oh, okay, let me put it another way, this, and this. And you go, yeah, actually, yeah, you've got a point there. I still feel this, but I take on board what you say. These are the sort of nuances that go into a real life conversation. And it doesn't happen, I don't think. I don't think people are that understanding, that mellow when they're having a conversation. Excuse me whilst I blow my hooter. I don't know what it is. It's probably some wintry cold that's creeping in. In the summer I could say, oh, well, it's hay fever, but I don't think it's hay fever now, but it's just some sort of allergy to something. Let me have a slurp of coffee. These sort of things, I listen to quite a lot of these sort of things that I'm doing now. I enjoy listening to somebody else's point of view. Whether I necessarily agree with everything they say, I don't know. But I just don't comment. I don't do any. I don't see the point of commenting, because particularly if they're very large audience, then they're never going to see it. And I want them to see it. I'm not bothered about their listeners seeing it, because their listeners, other people seeing it, will probably have a completely different point of view with me. And I'm not trying to argue or agree or be nice to the other viewers. It's the person who's making the content. So I never quite understand why people comment at all. In our situation, I'm actually asking you to put your comments so that I can read them back to you. But it's a different thing from having a real conversation. Plus the fact that when you write something down, it can be so easily misinterpreted, as I had the other day with somebody who thought that I misread it, and so then I didn't know what they were saying, and so I answered to that. And then they said, oh, I think you misunderstood what I was saying, and you seem to be getting at me. And I said, no, I'm really sorry. This was on an email exchange afterwards. So it is a very odd thing. But where can you have conversation? Do you enjoy? I love a good conversation. I've mentioned this before, that I would see my ex-girlfriend some years ago, and we would be sitting in the kitchen and have a meal, and we would engage on some conversation, possibly about politics, possibly about life, the universe, and everything, all those sort of things that people do, even about God and religion and things, or why such and such happened. Or we would be talking, debriefing each other on our days. My partner at the time worked in the corporate world in an office, and there was a lot of office politics about who sat where and how long they took their breaks and what somebody would be saying and things like that. And it was fascinating. I remember one particular conversation we were having, that she was working in an environment where she was in her sort of late 40s, and most of the other people in there were in their very early 20s, and they were looking for, because it might have been their first or second job with their partners, for a new house or to buy a house. And so they got into conversation in between work and what have you. And she said it was amazing how many of them in the office all wanted a brand new house. They wouldn't settle for second hand, just as they really didn't go to charity shops to have second hand clothes, or that they wouldn't buy things like second hand things. Everything had to be new. It was the disposable society. We want new, we don't want old. So we'd have a conversation about that, of how ridiculous it might be that people weren't even entertaining the idea of older properties, which may have been actually built much better and stronger, and we would just have this conversation about all those sort of things. And we were very much in agreement in that conversation. There was no combative thing. But sometimes we'd have a conversation where we would be talking about certain elements of politics or certain other subjects, and I would disagree, not necessarily vehemently, but I would disagree. And I said, well, I don't know that that's true, but I would definitely listen to the other point of view. And then I would explain why mine, and so on. And sometimes, I was won over. I'm quite an opinionated person, so it does take a bit of time to win me over, but I will listen and I will think about, and I'll say, we had that conversation the other day where you talked about so-and-so. Actually, I think you're quite right about that. I may have jumped the gun there. And in a conversation, if you've left it open-ended and you're still able to agree to disagree, you can go back and say, yeah, actually, now I think more about what you said. I think you're right. I don't think that happens online. I don't think people are prepared to go, oh, yes, no, I was wrong about that. Because I think then suddenly you feel incredibly more vulnerable, not only from the person you're talking to, but then other people who are able to look at that online conversation, who are not part of that conversation, and sort of go, ha, gotcha, as if you weren't part of it. You're not part of the original conversation. Don't you start putting your oar in. I don't know who you are and what grievance you've got with me about my conversation. I just don't think it happens. Whereas in real life, a conversation is not just about the words you say, but it's also how you say it, the emotion and the body language and the coming together of two or more people. And that seems to me to be a much more important thing, that you're having an experience. Put that conversation online and it's just about the words and the concept that's behind those words, not about the presence of somebody who's actually there, because you can't see it. And if you're online, even if you thought that way, even if you thought, I'll think about how this is affecting the other people, the fact that other people in the room can read that conversation and interpret it any other way they like, adds fuel to the fire, which is not there in a real conversation. If you're having a real conversation with somebody at a party, for example, some people might overhear it, but they won't necessarily hear every single word if they are not being spoken to. But also, they won't have the eye contact because they're not part of the conversation. Different if they're in the same group and there's 3 or 4 of you and you're arguing a point and 3 of you are even against one person who's trying to put their point of view and they're saying, no, and they're coming in. At least that way there is a dynamic. But the person over there who just happens to be earwigging and thinking, oh, yeah, this is and then wants to make a comment, they haven't been privy to it. And that's what happens, I think, when you put the conversation online. And my worry is that conversations, natural, organic conversations with human beings who are salient, that's not the word I want, salient, no, sentient might be the correct word, sentient beings who have consciousness and who think and have feelings and emotions, and there's reflected body language as you say stuff. And look at me, I'm waving my hands around quite a bit. It's all part of the experience of that conversation. Without that, you're just getting a transcript which is incredibly stripped from half of what if not more, of what actually the conversation was. Because when you're having a conversation, you can see if somebody is bristling or eager to add something, or they're enthusiastic about it, or perhaps they're misinformed and they're stumbling with their words, or whatever it is. And I just worry that conversation is disappearing. That type of conversation. So I'd be interested to know. I mean, I'm on my own most of the time. The lovely Julia will come in. We will have conversations. If we're driving somewhere, we'll have a conversation in the van together. We'll have conversations. Julia knows that I love a good conversation. I love to chat. I love to listen to other people's point of views, and I do like to provoke a little bit in order to stimulate a conversation and ask sometimes probing questions which can't always be answered. And I may respond to that, or I may not, whatever it is. But I do try my best to stimulate a conversation in the public. And sometimes if I'm out and about, I will actually go up to people, or sidle up to them if they're doing something. And I may then just start, just an innocuous, is that the right word, innocuous? An innocent conversation about nothing particularly interesting or important, but not interesting, that it might be interesting, but it's not important. Vacuous conversation about something. It might be about the weather, for goodness sake. After all, I am English, and that's what we English talk about. And there's those sort of things. It's like, blimey, look at the weather up there. Isn't it rubbish? Oh, yeah, terribly rubbish. Isn't it? I don't know. We've had such a lovely summer, though, haven't we? Oh, yes, we've had a delightful summer. I wonder if it's going to be like that in the winter. Do you think we'll have an Indian winter, Indian summer? Well, we could do. I know I was talking to a fella the other day. He puts up seaweed. Why does he put up seaweed? Well, because so you can have a conversation that just rambles, and 10 minutes later you have been fulfilled. You wouldn't have that conversation. You wouldn't have the same fulfillment if you were just typing that online. But unfortunately, it does feel, and I'm not, as I say, I don't necessarily believe in these conspiracies in which there are the elites that are trying to push us and keep us in cages. I just think it's a sad reality of modern life and the way that we have progressed to this world, that it feels like we're being shoved into these boxes, although there are definite signs that people have been locking us down for unknown reasons. And I think these decisions are being taken poorly and wrongly because of the evolution of this digital world, in which it seems like, what will be the problem? We're going to try and save everybody. We'll lock them all down. It'll be fine. Will it, though? Will it? Well, it does turn out that actually it's not been fine locking people down in their houses. That actually people do need to go out. That actually what we do need to do is increase the amount of public houses, for example, and coffee shops, although coffee shops are not the same as public houses in the way that you can go and put the world to rights, because the alcohol, although I'm not a great advocate for alcohol, I don't drink, I'm not a teetotaler, I do occasionally have a drink, I'm not against it as such, but it's very easy to go down that slippery slope. My mother was an alcoholic. My ex-girlfriend was an alcoholic. I've known many alcoholics in my life, and it is a horrible and nasty thing. And once you're in it, it's very difficult to escape from it. I get all that. However, alcohol can relax you, just as I suppose things like cannabis can, although I wouldn't recommend that, and I would be totally anti that, although some people, believe it's the best thing since sliced bread, although I don't actually eat much sliced bread either, so, because of the bad wheat and various things, but let's not go down there. That's a completely different point. My point being is I think if we were able to get more public houses in where we could have weaker beer rather than stronger beer, that people respected things like alcohol, but they were going there just to relax, that the beer was far cheaper, that people would go in there in the evenings and have a right old conversation. Okay, sometimes in some situations, some people would get completely het up and they'd be outside and there'd be fisticuffs and you'd settle it over a punch. I'm not completely in favour of that, but that's a minor, tiny little escalation of it. I think it would be much nicer to have people in conversations all over the world, putting the world to rights and saying their piece and feeling they've achieved something, and then going home and sleeping it all off and getting up the following day, which, of course, we used to have in this country. So I don't know. Somebody mentioned in the comments the other day about, is the digital world a good thing or a bad thing? And actually, again, I was thinking about that. It's a great thing for me to be able to put this out to you, but then I've got to face the barrage of comments, which might be a load of people saying that actually, Richard, you're a complete and utter idiot, you're a cretin, you don't know what you're talking about, you shouldn't have the moral right to live. People can be incredibly harsh and horrible, and they don't even know me. They think they know me, they think they know everything about me. Julia and I get this on our other channel. People think that they know exactly all about our life, but they only know what we put out. And that's a very different thing from having a conversation with you in which they will only know what you say, but they also will see the aura, the smiles, you might be with somebody and you might exchange a glance when somebody says something. It's not said, but it's a whole different thing. I would say 2/3 of a conversation is in body language rather than the 1/3 is what's actually spoken, because there's always that something between the lines. But you may completely disagree, and of course you're entitled to disagree. And in this, I'm saying please let me know what you think, and I'll try and read some of your comments out. So thank you very much for that. Let's have a look at some of the conversations that you've been having, or the comments rather that you've been having about recent ones. So to start off with, the one I talk about where we were having a complaint. I have a complaint. Anne L says, over here in North Carolina in the USA, our flags are half staffed to honour the Queen. Okay, brilliant. Norman said nothing to do with having a complaint, by the way. Why can't I sleep? Long tiviot. What? Have I spelt that correctly? No idea. Don't know what you mean. Qualcomm Chandler says, and please don't take it personally if I say I don't know what you mean, or I don't know what the word is. I just genuinely don't know what the word is, so I'm sorry about that, Tony. Qualcomm Challoner, whatever that is, People have some very strange names on there. That's not a criticism. I'm just saying they're strange to me, okay? You have to put so many caveats down these days because people get very angry. He says, what about sex, Richard, if you can't sleep? You didn't mention that. I find it's a great way to drift off sod scribbling notes at 3 a.m. Well, if you're able to wake up your partner and your partner is receptive to it, then I suppose good for you. And if you're in the mood for it, but not always. If I'm lying in bed at night thinking, oh, I've got some ideas for a YouTube channel or for my YouTube channel, and I've got ideas for things that we can do, and I must get these things off my head, or conversations for the chinwag, or for things around the house, or things that I might remember. Oh, by the way, I must remember to pay the council tax, or I must remember to do this. I think then, to me, it's like, I don't want to forget these things. Having sex, as you put it, is likely to put all those things completely out of my head. And then I may wake up a little bit later on and go, oh, what was I thinking about? I had these great ideas. Now I can't remember. We had some great sex. Yeah, that was fantastic. But I still haven't resolved what it was that was buzzing around in my head. So it may work for you. I would go down and write these things down, but that's just me. Carl Chapman says, hi, Richard. As I've got older, I don't seem to be able to sleep as well. The lack of sleep builds up into a long sleep every now and then. I get up and watch some fool rambling on YouTube and then nod off again. Yes, well, I'm sure there's plenty of fools on YouTube, as you say. And this is where real conversation, I would see that wry smile, that cheeky grin, as you say it. Thank you very much, Carl. Shirley Lynch says, I can't sleep. Well, I just get up and make a cup of tea and maybe read for a wee while. Great chatty chinwag again. Thank you very much, Shirley. You see, if you can't sleep, the best thing to do is to put this on. That'll get you to sleep. Shanghai Goat says, why can't I sleep? Easy answer, beautiful new GF. I don't know what that means. Is that a giraffe? Beautiful new giraffe. Okay. Illuminated Galaxy says, I always go to sleep with either Classic FM on or a YouTube relaxation video, or get up and sit outside my garden bench stargazing. Well, that sounds very nice. I think that would be a good thing to do. Unless, of course, it's a cloudy evening. English Andy says, too much clutter in the mind. Too much clutter. That should be 2 zeros. I'm not judging. Why can't I sleep? Too much clutter in the mind. All you need to do is yoga and meditation for 6 hours before you go to sleep. 6 hours? Who's got 6 hours to do yoga and meditation? English Andy, I'd be interested to know how you fit that in. But, maybe you do. Maybe that's your job, in which case, that's absolutely perfectly fine, isn't it? But maybe you've got other things to do. 6 hours before you go to bed. I've actually probably want to be cooking a meal. I might be doing some washing. I need to wash up after that meal. I might want to engage in conversation, heaven forbid. Dave Baker says, I always seem to wake up in the early hours of the morning. I don't go to bed till late. I'm always woken up early. Let's hope that you catch up with sleep somewhere along the line, because I think actually sleep is very important for you. But well done, and thank you for the comment. Jim Paulson says, I find applause at a funeral procession passes by in very poor taste. It's as if people are celebrating that the person is dead. Yes, I completely agree. I think it's totally the wrong idea. I gather, and this may be wrong and you can correct me, and this is not a criticism of the nation, but I gather it's an American thing to do this. I may be wrong, as I say, and I'm not criticizing Americans per se, but I am criticizing the fact of clapping a coffin. What are you actually clapping? Are you clapping the vehicle that carries it in? Or what? I would like to have seen, personally, because the Queen was on the throne for so long, I would like to have seen everywhere the Queen... I would like to have seen the hearse with horse-drawn in a big glass carriage. That would have been lovely to have seen. And also, everywhere they stopped, stone crosses to have been erected, just as Edward I did in 13, whatever it was, when he was erecting, I think, 12 stone crosses to Eleanor, his beloved wife, who died I think up in Scotland, in Edinburgh, wherever it was. And there are two genuine ones that exist, one at Northampton, I forget where the other one is, and there's a replica one at Charing Cross, the last one that was built. I would love to have seen something like that, little memorial at each place. They used to do it on such a grand scale. We don't seem to do things on a grand scale anymore. We just televise everything and then take it all away as if nothing has really happened, which is a real shame. Why can't you sleep? Lee Pollard says ancient deer, versions of deer with Zimmer frames. Not quite sure if that was a joke or just a moment of mental aberration. Could have been. I've no idea. How do you know? It's in text, Anne Asborn, always go to sleep, she says, listening to an audiobook. If I wake in the night and I can't sleep, I go downstairs, make a cup of tea, have a look at my tablet, not tablets that you swallow, and then go back to bed and listen to an audiobook. And that usually gets me back to sleep. Fantastic. There we are. Everybody's got their method of doing it. Leo Pold, which is the one I think I misread your name earlier. I'm sorry about that, rushing to get the show in. Says, if you've not washed the pots that day, washing pots is a good thing to do if you cannot sleep. It's not brain challenging, it's a routine, ploddy nature to it, and the warm water is nice. I totally agree. Sometimes you don't want to have anything to stimulate you when you go. That's why I sort of take these things out of my head, put them on paper when if I can't sleep. But I totally agree, washing the pots in the middle of the night or doing some routine thing like just sweeping the floor, or don't get the Hoover out because you might wake up yourself or the neighbours. That's just, depending on how loud your Hoover is. Are we allowed to say Hoover? Hoover's it's one of those things, and it's vacuum cleaner, I suppose is what I should say. But I think Hoover is now in the dictionary. I forget the term for that. There's a term, People will go, Richard, it's this, it's this. Because you know how anal people get. They do want to correct me on every single thing I do. And so there we go. That will be good. And finally, Aaron Walker says, I'm with you on cold plates, hot food on hot plates, and I do speak up if not. Thank you very much. That's very good. So, marvellous, brilliant. Thank you very much for all those wonderful comments. Keep them coming in. And I want to know, what's your thoughts on conversation? Do you manage to get a proper good conversation with people, either your family and friends or people you don't actually know? And how much of conversation do you think in real life is important against conversations or comments and things online? Are you rewarded in the same way? Do you walk away from your keyboard if you've just slagged somebody off, or you've just said, I really enjoy your video, whatever it is? Do you get that same experience, or compared to a conversation with real people who you've just had, half an hour's laughing and jollity and all the rest of it? Is it the same? Let me know in the comments, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye for now.